Hello. Please like and subscribe. Please, 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 please. So pathetic, but yeah. This week, the intention had been to dial it down a little and bring you a shorter story. Unfortunately, TMN keeps finding these very detailed stories she feels compelled to research and bring you. So here we are. December 31st, 1930. New Year's Eve, but early that morning. Should have been a day to celebrate. Instead, a young woman, 19 years old, was found dead in her home in Washington, D.C. The night before, she had been looking forward to a party, apparently had a grand time, and then early the morning of December 31st, about 1:30 a.m., she returned home with William Patty, her escort to the dance. They talked for a while, Vernon, her brother, and roommate, joining them for a bit, then Patty left. Just before 5 a.m., Richard Reed, friend and also roommate, went into her barely furnished cold room to fix the fire. Assuming she was asleep as the covers were pulled up over her head, which she could have been that, or at that time, she may have been dead. 3 hours later, at about 8:30 a.m., her brother Vernon came in and found he could not wake her up, also noting the covers pulled up over her head. He either called his mother or went to his mother's. An ambulance was called at 10 a.m. Now, I'm not sure if this timeline is correct, as that seems like a long gap in time, but anywho, things will clear up later. And yes, there was a long gap. The 19-year-old deceased young woman, Beulah Limerick. Standard, right? Well, let's get to the oddities right away. Dr. Lyman Green was on the ambulance and had officially declared her dead, also noting she had been washed and dressed, her face powdered and her hair arranged. She had flecks of blood around her mouth. Initially, the cause of death was thought to be a hemorrhage from natural causes. But no. It would be several hours later, at about 6 p.m. that same evening, New Year's Eve, when the undertaker was preparing her body for the funeral, that he discovered that her neatly arranged hair was covering a gunshot wound to the back of her head. Coroner and police were called, and the cause of death changed to murder. Police would search the house an hour later, but find no evidence, but did find her diary. By midnight that night, New Year's Eve night, Patrolman Robert Langdon was assigned to duty at the house. Note his name. Beulah was not a stay-at-home gal. She had a lot of boy friends. She enjoyed dances and parties, and she was secretary of the so-called Sky High Whoopee Club. Summer of 1930, she and a friend, Iona Dooney, drove out to Kansas and hitchhiked all the way back to D.C. A month later, they hitchhiked to California, stopped by Mexico, and then they returned to D.C. She was married at the age of 14 to a Mr. Atchison, middle-aged farmer in Maryland. The marriage, wasn't great. They had married July 4th, 1925, and she left him September 1926 after a bad fight. Just a few weeks prior to her murder, she got an annulment. Well, that's what the paper said. This would also get cleared up later. Morning of New Year's Day, 1931, 8 a.m. Police find blood-stained pillows and a bullet hole in the blanket and mattress. What else would police find in the house? A .25 caliber automatic pistol shell in her room. Police attempted to find the murder weapon and could not find one that was a .25 caliber. A .38 caliber was found in the house, and 3 other guns were found in a gas station where Vernon and Richard, plus another brother of Vernon and Beulah Limerick, William, worked. The police are holding on to these for now, but pretty much have said they hold no real bearing on the murder itself. If Beulah had been shot at home, why didn't anyone else hear it? Don't know. Neither Richard nor Vernon claim to have heard anything. Police are trying to better pinpoint everybody's timeline, including her dance escort, Patty. Now, the police have to start somewhere, right? Well, they're holding 3 men as suspects right now. One of them, her brother Vernon Limerick, who she lives with and who discovered that she was dead. Another, Richard Reed, who lives with his siblings and had started up the fire in Beulah's room. Police thinking that she may have been killed after Richard had left the house between 5:30 and 8:30 when Vernon had tried to wake her up. And then William Patty, the man she had gone to the dance with at Capitol Heights. Plus a barber and a painter who apparently were both sweet on Beulah. January 2nd, policeman Robert Langdon is on duty guarding the house. Her funeral services were privately held with only family present. January 3rd, also being held with suspicion, policeman Robert Langdon, a supposed acquaintance of Beulah's and who happened to be on patrol near her home the morning of the murder. Early days, but already police are calling it, quote, the worst mess in the history of the department, end quote. Well, at least they're honest. He is not charged, but is held under guard at the precinct. You say tomato and I say tomato. Mrs. Langdon, his wife, would say, quote, I have not seen Richard since his name has been mentioned in connection with this affair. I have been trying to locate him all morning. Till I have seen him and talked with him, I don't know of anything I can say at this time, end quote. A .25 caliber pistol had been found on his person when he was first questioned, but he had said he had not carried it with him the night of the murder, that he carried it in his civilian clothes. The night of the murder, while patrolling, he would have been carrying his regulation service pistol. Ballistics testing will be done, as you can imagine. The painter, questioned and released. Well, the newspaper, at least the one I was looking at for January 5th, published several excerpts from Beulah's diary, taking out most names except for that of her close friend Martha, who was the president of the Whoopee Club. Police are hoping to glean who could possibly be suspects in her death. It's the diary of a 19-year-old young lady who has a good time. Just a couple of entries. Quote, October 16th, our big night, our real party. Blank and blank came over. Blank kissed me. Not bad. Better than I expected. I may find him interesting after all. End quote. Quote, December 8th. Someday I'm going to get up early when I get in and stay up. Oh well. Enjoy life while you can is my motto. I don't care. Blank got drunk, but blank, and I had lots of fun. Martha came and we were busy cleaning all day for the party. Among our first guests were blank and his two cousins. Had a large crowd. Did not have such a hot time. End quote. She would have a few more diary entries and then was murdered the end of December. Ballistics testing would show that neither of Langdon's guns were the death gun. Roommate Reed, brother Vernon, and Patty, her party companion, are also still being held and questioned. The police are also still coming up with theories, as per usual, when nothing else seems to be panning out. The men mentioned in her diary are being called in for questioning. Supposedly, police learned that Beulah was scared of Langdon and had planned to move out to get away from him. However, I do not know as of yet where that information came from. January 6th. Langdon has been suspended from the police force pending investigation. And now we have learned a bit about Langdon and Beulah. Beulah and Reed, her roommate, and her brother were actively looking for another place to live. I don't believe they, Beulah and Reed, were a couple or anything in actuality, although they put themselves forward that way to the real estate office as Mr. and Mrs. Reed. Apparently, only the day before she was murdered, she and Reed had secured a new place to rent, which would also be occupied by Beulah's brother. Members of her family had told the police that she wanted to get away from the area of the 5th Police Precinct to get away from Langdon, as he had been annoying her. Martha Bargfried, a very good friend of Beulah's, and had been at the party that night and had been driven home by Beulah and Patty before Beulah and Patty headed to Beulah's house. The police want the names of those at the party from Martha. So, Langdon, what's he saying? Not much, denying any knowledge of the murder, but the police want to know why he went to the door of the house twice that night and why he said that he had turned his flashlight into the room. Now, this is odd for sure. Apparently a light had been on in the house all night, according to a neighbor who had woke up at midnight and saw a light shining also at 1 a.m. and 5 a.m. So why would he say he had flashed his light? And why did he go to the door at 2 o'clock and 4 o'clock that morning without there being due cause to do so? He had flashed his light into the room, I guess from the window, and saw she was in bed with her head covered by blankets. Now, back to her family. Beulah's sister, Mrs. Julia Bywaters, would tell the police, quote, Beulah told me that she had wanted to get away from the place because she was afraid of what Langdon might do to her. She said she would move any place just so it was out of the 5th precinct where Langdon is stationed. On one occasion, she told me that when Langdon threatened her, he said he had knocked off one girl and that Beulah had better watch out. It is possible that Langdon made certain advances towards Beulah who repulsed him. She said Langdon had tried to date her up several times and that she refused to have anything to do with him. End quote. January 7th. 5 men under arrest, not charged with murder. Police are at odds. Other than the 4 men I've already mentioned, I'm not really going to talk about anybody else because they don't figure into anything now or into the future. Police are back at Beulah's house to do some testing. They've put the blankets and mattress back on her cot and fired bullets through them to see if the bullet would pass through the mattress and lodge into the floor. The test would show a discrepancy in Langdon's story. He claimed to have found an empty bullet shell in a coffee cup in the kitchen. But the test would show that a .25 caliber pistol would not have been able to throw a shell at that distance if shot in her bed area. And Beulah's mother said she had washed all of the cups, and there had been no shell in any of them. Who is probably our main suspect, now former policeman Langdon? Well, the police went to visit his house to look for another .25 caliber pistol when they found 2 dismantled stills from his cellar. He had been arrested over a year ago for delivering a keg of liquor to some address, but was found not guilty because he said that someone had planted the liquor in his car. And looky what we have. Apparently, it's against the law to have an unregistered still in your possession, even if it's not operational. Weird. Also weird, why Vernon Limerick, Beulah's brother, walked 20 blocks to the home of his mother, then waited while his 2 sisters were called home from work. Then they all went back to Beulah's house before they even called someone about Beulah's condition. Vernon had a telephone. They lived not far from a hospital. Hello to why he's a suspect. January 9th, coroner's inquest. Lots of witnesses. Shall we? Dr. A. Magruder MacDonald, deputy coroner. She had a bullet wound to the right side of the head. The bullet had traveled from right to left and upward. .25 caliber shell. The bullet had driven a piece of bone into the brain. The bullet remained in her head. Cause of death, gunshot wound causing hemorrhage. He detected the odor of alcohol in her stomach, likely from alcoholic beverage imbibing. Slight scratch at the root of the nose and a bruise on the left arm. Dr. Lyman James Green, ambulance surgeon who had pronounced her dead. Quote, I was called to the house about 10:15 the morning of December 31st and found a girl in bed dead. There was immaculate linen on the bed. Her head was on a pillow covered with an immaculate slip, and she had every appearance of having been laid out. I found her dead, but did not give the cause of death as that is outside of my profession. I told a policeman to notify the coroner that it was a coroner's case. End quote. He relayed more than once that there was no evidence of blood on the sheets or pillow. He described the positions he had to move the body in, saying that she was flat on her back, but that he moved her arms to find a pulse. He had lifted her head 4 or 5 inches. No blood on pillow. Found blood in the mouth, looked for evidence of poison, but it was a hemorrhage. The detective who took pics for the police presented pictures he had taken of the room while Dr. Green continued on the stand. One of the attorneys shows 2 blood-stained sofa pillows and asked Dr. Green if he had seen them in the room. Response? No. But then Lieutenant Kefauver with the fire department had been called like 20 minutes later, arrived and saw that there were a couple of dirty old pillows under her head. He prepared to put a bandage around her head to keep her mouth closed. Quote, I removed a pillow and noticed a blood spot about the size of a big orange on the pillow. I laid the pillow aside and finished bandaging the head. The pillow looked as if the blood had saturated into it. There was another pillow under her head, but I did not disturb that. End quote. Okay, huh? Green said that there were slipcovers on the pillows. Kefauver said there weren't. Then Frederick Byrne with the undertaker testified as he was the one that discovered there was blood coming out of her head. He called the coroner's office immediately. Remember, the coroner didn't discover that she had been killed with a gun until after this. The witnesses are not going in chronological order of events. Interestingly, Mr. Byrne would say that the evening of January 1st, Policeman Langdon came to the undertaking parlor and he mentioned to Byrne that another officer had told Langdon there was a murder. Byrne, rightly so, told Langdon he did not want to talk about the case and called out another officer who had been in the front room. D.A. William Collins asked, "How long was Mr. Langdon with you?" Answer, "About 5 minutes." "Did he appear nervous?" "I don't recall." "Well, what was his appearance?" "He was sort of quick and acted like he was trying to find something out." January 10th. Inquest continues. The morning of the murder, Langdon found a bullet in the floor under the bed. That was when he saw the shell in the coffee cup. Detectives would say the next day they never saw it. And Langdon would say this was after the detectives had already searched the place. Then we had already heard from Lieutenant Kefauver of the Fire Rescue Squad that he had placed a bandage about her head. But by the time the undertaker team arrived, the bandage was gone. January 12th. Coroner's jurors took a field trip to the murder house. Apparently Vernon had originally said that he had accompanied his sister to the dance, then backtracked and said that his mother told him to say that. His mother originally said that was a lie, but at the coroner's inquest, she admitted that she had asked him to do that to protect Beulah's reputation from scandal. Here are the questions police want answered. Number 1. Why did the dozen or more people in the death room the day Beulah Limerick's body was found failed to see the .25 caliber shell lying in plain sight by the stove? The shell was not noticed until 8:30 that night, almost 12 hours after members of the family arrived at the house. Number 2, why was the bullet hole in the mattress and the lead slug in the floor not discovered until the following day when Policeman Langdon went on duty at the house? Number 3, was Beulah Limerick dead or dying when Langdon looked in the window of her room at 4 o'clock the morning of the murder? Was she dead or dying when Richard Reed came in at 4:45? Langdon says she was lying partly uncovered when he looked in, her feet out towards the stove. Reed said she was completely swathed in the blankets. Number 4, whose sedan was parked in front of the death house at 12:30 a.m. the morning of the murder, seen by Mrs. Pearl Poston from across the street? Number 5, why did not Langdon report to headquarters the unprintable indecencies he now says he witnessed from time to time in the house? Why did he not ask for a warrant in view of what he claims to have seen while peering through windows at night? Number 6, who was the mysterious woman with the soft voice who has been telephoning police and directing suspicion towards Langdon? Number 7, who rearranged the body of the slain girl, stuffing hair in the wound, combing her hair, and arranging the bed covering? And number 8, what is the fear-engendering agency that has led almost every person connected with the case to lie about it? January 13th. Well, police are getting a bit desperate for something to break the case wide open. They start arresting people for questioning in Beulah's murder left and right. The coroner's inquest was stopped for 48 hours as police started to look into potential new evidence. Arrested? Martha Bargfried, Beulah's close friend and president of the Whoopee Club, the moment she had stepped off of the witness stand at the inquest. And Martha's husband, George, had already been arrested a few hours earlier. Beulah's family discussed Beulah's fear of Langdon and that Langdon had entered her room at night and caused her to want to move. He claimed he was seeking evidence because he considered her house to be a disorderly resort. Police had been called out to it for noise and other disturbances. Martha would actually say that Beulah had no fear of Langdon other than that the house might be raided. According to Martha, Langdon turned on Vernon and Richard Reed, calling them bootleggers, and that's why Beulah wanted to move out of his precinct. Martha would, on the stand, kind of implicate David Limerick, another brother, who had assaulted Martha before, in what manner I'm not sure, and would tell the jury that the only person Beulah feared was David, who had hit Beulah once and knocked her out unconscious because she liked to hang out with men, and he told Martha once that he would slap the hell out of her if she came around to the Limerick house. And otherwise on the stand, we've got more contradictions. Beulah's mother had apparently packed up a trunk of Beulah's things and had it sent to the mother's house. She had admitted on the stand. Police grabbed the trunk and looked through it, hoping for some clues. Also found was a box of makeup. Dr. Green had said when he saw Beulah, her face had been made up, but the family denied that. Captain Edward Kelly is thinking about filing charges against policeman Satterthwaite. Captain Kelly said that the officer told him he was at the undertaker's when Langdon had showed up and had said that Langdon was nervous and upset. But on the stand, the officer made no such claims and did not recall saying such things. January 14th. Next up, arrested for questioning were Mrs. Dora Limerick, Beulah's ma, and Mrs. Julia Bywaters, Beulah's sister. Why? Well, Martha had told the police that the two women had told her that a gun had been found in the stove after the murder, but asked her not to say anything about it. And we already know that Beulah's ma has made some false statements. And then also taken into custody was Robert Merchant, a radio entertainer who had been mentioned in Beulah's diary fairly often. He had played at a dance the club had given just a few hours before Beulah was killed. Martha had told police Beulah was in love with him, but Merchant would say he didn't feel the same way, just considered her a friend. There may be a police shakeup as it continues to come out that quite a few of them have a dereliction of duty, not doing their job, or being careless. January 15th. Police had Martha confront Beulah's ma, insists about the information they had told Martha, but they didn't budge. Vernon was taken out of his cell and taken to his mother. She begged him to tell all. He said he had. He was taken back to his cell. Mrs. Limerick and Mrs. Bywater, the mother and sister, were released from custody. Richard Reed, who was pretended to be married to Beulah to try to get that apartment, was questioned about the information in Beulah's diary about how much they quarreled. He said it was just on the state of the house and how untidy it was. The rest of his story about finding Beulah, etc., he has not wavered on. A taxi cab driver, Edward McIntyre, called Mac was apparently in love with her. After she had denied him, he went to Philadelphia, but then returned before New Year's. People who saw him said he acted strange after the murder was discovered and within 2 days had gone back to Philly. He had a gun, apparently showed it off whenever he was drunk. Mac was also said to have threatened to shoot Vernon. New theory: that Beulah was shot elsewhere, perhaps in the kitchen. She turned and ran and collapsed into her bed. A second bullet was fired and missed through the mattress and into the floor. The first empty shell could then have ejected into the coffee cup in the kitchen. Both the shell and the second bullet were found by Langdon. Murderer then fled after all of the noise, which, as Vernon and Reed didn't hear anything. What noise? January 16th. Langdon was last witness. The coroner, it's his inquest, insisted that all women vacate the courtroom due to the nature of Langdon's testimony. Jeez. But yes, sign of the times. Anyway, Langdon relayed his version of the goings-on in Beulah's home. He had first gone to the home on December 1st after his sergeant had told him the house was occupied and suspicious. Langdon checked it out, thought there was no one living there, so let it be. 2 weeks later, a neighbor, Mrs. Poston, had called in a complaint. Langdon went at 6 a.m., kicked on the door, and the door had opened. Quote, a girl's voice said, "Who's there?" And I said, "Police," and walked in. The girl was lying on the bed in a step-in or a chemise, and her legs were bare. When she saw me, she pulled a blanket over her. A man was sitting in a chair at the side of the bed. End quote. He said the girl thumbed her nose at him as he left. Another time, he was looking in a window and saw a man with Beulah who he believed to be a man who had previously denied being in the house. Then early the morning of the murder, after he had followed Patty for a bit, he used his flashlight to look in the window and saw Beulah appearing to have stretched her legs out towards the stove. He could not see her head. He left after about 20 seconds. He learned of the murder and that evening drove by the house, allegedly at the suggestion of his daughter. On the way home, he stopped at the drugstore at the request of his wife, which store happened to be near the undertaker's. He ran into the undertakers to ask a few questions about Beulah's death, as a crime had happened on his cop beat. That night, he volunteered to stay in the murder house. His orders to only allow those of the 5th Precinct inside. He was not instructed to touch nothing. This would be contradicted later. He discovered the empty shell in a coffee cup. He looked for the bullet for that shell. He examined the walls and bed, turned the mattress upside down, and saw a small hole. He moved the deathbed, swept the floor, got on all fours, and found the bullet hole in the floor. Quote, I thought I was doing as a policeman should do. If for a minute I thought headquarters had not made a careful examination of the place before I got there, I would not have touched a thing. End quote. Attorney Collins asked only 2 questions. He asked, quote, how long have you been a police officer? Going on 8 years. Did the act you said you saw through the window suggest a basis for a warrant or an immediate arrest? Yes, it suggested basis for a warrant, but not for an arrest, not when there are 4 people to swear against 1 policeman. End quote. January 17th. So what would happen? The 4 suspects are being held over, now to be scrutinized and judged by the grand jury. Quote, we, the coroner's jury, find that Beulah Limerick, 19, white, came to her death on the morning of December 31st, 1930, as a result of a gunshot wound from a pistol in the hands of some person unknown to this jury. We believe that Vernon Limerick, Richard Reed, William Patty, and Robert F. Langdon has sufficient guilty knowledge to warrant us in recommending that they be held for the action of the grand jury. End quote. And they still can't find the gun. January 19th. Taxi driver McIntyre was located, voluntarily surrendered, and is being questioned. McIntyre is 18, a member of the Sky High Whoopee Club, and a friend of Beulah's. He was released, but not before saying that David Limerick, Beulah's brother, a little suspicious. McIntyre had gone to the home several times. One time Beulah had gone out with several men, leaving him with David and Richard Reed. They started a dice game where McIntyre won all the money. David left. A shot was heard outside. Then he came back in with a handkerchief over his face and holding a gun. He ordered Reed and McIntyre to get their hands up and to give him their money. Reed removed the mask and explained to McIntyre it was just a joke. But then later that night, David started a fight with McIntyre, hit him, and took his money. David was arrested by 2 cops who had heard the shot, but McIntyre refused to make a complaint. The gun David was wielding? A .32 caliber. That was Reed's. January 26th. Grand jury underway. I'm going to gloss over this a bit since we heard a lot during the coroner's inquest, but if something extraordinary comes up, I'll let you know. We still have the same 4 suspects: Vernon, Reed, Langdon, and Patty. January 29th. 5th suspect in custody, 30-year-old widower Fred Bauman, who works at the Bureau of Engraving and Printing. Supposedly, he admitted that he was acquainted with Beulah, but more intimately acquainted with members of her family. Mrs. Ethel Endale, sister of Beulah, works at the Bureau also. Supposedly, he was at the murder house the day after the killing. He has been providing food to Patty, Vernon, and Reed while they are in jail. Nothing really comes of this. We're 5 days into the grand jury. No smoking gun. No gun at all, actually. And nothing has been cleared up from what it appears. February 10th. Iron worker Frederick Taylor admits he had made an anonymous phone call and sent a letter, both which implicated Langdon. He did so at the instigation of Beulah's ma and sister. The 2 women wanted the heat off of Vernon, Reed, and Patty, so they had invited Taylor and asked him to do this. When asked about it, the 2 women denied it, though they did admit that Taylor had been in their home as they thought maybe he knew some stuff. However much the women denied, Taylor could not be shaken. And he also denied that he knew Beulah. This is not Mrs. Limerick's first rodeo in tampering with testimony. February 17th. So what happened with the grand jury? All 4 suspects were released from jail. The grand jury said that the evidence they had received, quote, does not sufficiently indicate the guilt of any person or persons, end quote. So we're back to the beginning. Now, Langdon still, LOL, unintentional pun, has some issues with the still and whiskey found in his home. That's a separate matter. The grand jury gave some props to Assistant U.S. Attorney Julian Richards for his patience and indulgence in presenting evidence. Kelly and Flattery of the detective bureaus were said to have made, quote, courageous, diligent, and conscientious effort to solve this crime, end quote. Grand jury said that doctors or interns who are called in should be required to report immediately to police anything suspicious and to remain at the scene until the coroner or police arrive. Because deputy coroners prefer doing their autopsies at the undertakers, because of the, quote, inadequate facilities and generally poor conditions, end quote, at the morgue, the grand jury advised that they make a proper investigation and correct these conditions. Sad when the grand jury has to tell you to fix your crap. Feels like we're done, right? Unsolved case, no suspects, no weapon. Hun, we ain't done yet. TMN hasn't reached the 1 hour mark. Believe me, I look for shorter cases, and I find these hot messes instead. April 8th. People still visit the murder house. The house numbers have been replaced with a cardboard sign. No trespassing signs decorate the outside. The windows covered with brown paper. Apparently some boys have dug a cave in the back. What? April 9th. So Beulah's suit asking for an annulment from her marriage to Mr. Atchison, I thought it had already been settled. No. Today, Justice Proctor officially dismissed the suit, which she had filed 2 years ago. I guess 3 weeks before she was killed, they had entered into an interlocutory decree. What's that, you ask? Which I also asked. It's a court order or judgment issued during a legal case that is not a final decision and does not resolve all the issues in the case. It's a temporary ruling made while the case is still ongoing, addressing specific points or matters before a final judgment is reached. Of course, she's deceased, so now it's been formally dismissed. She asserted in the suit she had been coerced into the marriage because of his influence, and she claimed she had left him on September 7th, 1926. December 31st, 1932, the 1-year anniversary of her death. October 9th, 1936, the so-called murder house was demolished. The National Capital Park and Planning Commission planned to build a stadium there. Now, I would note that in the area, they built DC Stadium in 1961, which later became known as RFK Stadium, which is no longer in use. So I'm not sure what the real reason was as to why the house was demolished at this point, unless literally it took that long to start changing the scenery for the stadium. April 13th, 1937. Langdon back in the news. He ended up getting dismissed from the force, I think more for the still and liquor issues. Now he's waiting for the grand jury because on March 28th, he flagged a Merchants Limited train with a flashlight and showed the train crew a section of heavy chain wrapped around the track. Immediately, he was deemed a hero for warning the train, except he was the one that placed the chain on the track. On investigation of a nearby bridge, they found a rust-stained towel where the section of chain had been removed. Langdon's home had similar towels. Now, the end of December, the news is all over the fact that police are saying they have a key person they want to arrest. They've got their eyes on this person, and he's going down. They've arrested his wife for questioning, but have her hidden. Got your guesses on who it is? February 15th, 1938. It's been 7 years since the murder. Grand jury has indicted former policeman Robert Langdon for Beulah's murder. Langdon is currently in New Haven, Connecticut, held on a charge of trying to wreck a train, and will be sent to D.C. to stand trial. Dude, you've got too much stuff on your plate. So, let's hear from Langdon. Quote, I'm not worried a damn bit. My conscience is clear. I've known this was going to happen for the last few days, but they haven't got a thing on me. The only thing I am worried about is that this will bring an innocent kid into this mess." End quote. Questioned as to the identity of the innocent kid, Langdon refuses to amplify that statement, and we never again hear anything more about that. But he did make veiled threats against Washington police officials, saying, quote, "When this is over, I could give someone a story that will blow some heads off down in Washington. I feel more worried about this case up here," the train stuff, "than I do about any case the Washington police have dug up against me. When you're innocent, you're innocent. And they haven't got a thing on me because there is nothing they can get on an innocent man." End quote. Anyway, the train wrecking charge will be dropped so he can be turned over to the detectives for Beulah's murder. In an odd statement, which is just suspicious, when asked if he knew who did kill her, he said, quote, "Maybe I know, and maybe I don't. But you don't think I'm going to tell you, do you?" End quote. Ugh. William Limerick, one of Beulah's brothers, quote, "If he is guilty, I hope he gets the limit under the law. But I do hope the case will be settled once and for all. I'm pretty tired of the whole thing." End quote. May 16th, 1938. Trial begins. Time for a jury selection. Again, the coroner's inquest was pretty detailed. I'm only going to talk about stuff that's new to the case or wasn't mentioned back 7 years ago. May 18th, 1938. Familiar witnesses, ones who have been suspects previously. Patty would recount his story about the night and early morning of the party, as would Richard Reed and Vernon Limerick. Beulah, Richard, and Vernon had moved into the house November 1st, barely 2 months before she was murdered. May 19th. James Caparata, former bootlegger, testified that Langdon asked James to give Langdon an alibi. On the morning that Beulah was found dead, Langdon had come to his home and asked, quote, "If anyone inquires about me, say I was at your house this morning." End quote. Policeman Bell testified that at 3 in the morning he saw Langdon on East Capitol between 18th and 19th Streets, less than a half block from Beulah's house. Bell had just done his call into the station. Milkman Boyer said that he heard 2 shots fired between 2:30 and 2:45 a.m. in the direction of Beulah's house. That didn't help the government because no second bullet was found in the house. Yes, confused? That contradicts Langdon's story about a hole in the floor under the bed. Then Reed said that they were going to move out because they didn't like the neighborhood and there was no heat in the house. And yes, the police had been watching the house because of their activities, but not because Langdon had been bothering with Beulah. Vernon would say he couldn't say if Langdon was one of the cops in the house. Ouch, prosecution. That's gotta hurt. May 20th. It was confirmed in testimony that Langdon had requested to guard the murder house. Lieutenant Pierce would say he had explicitly told Langdon not to touch anything in the house and not to let anyone but the homicide squad touch anything. Langdon disobeyed. Why did Langdon disobey? He would say, quote, "I thought it would be to the advantage of the department to get that evidence." End quote. Other police witnesses would say that when they had searched the house prior to that, there was no bullet hole, there was no shell. Lieutenant Flaherty declared emphatically that there was no hole in the mattress and there was no hole in the floor when he examined the house January 1st. January 2nd is when Langdon claimed to have found the so-called evidence. So Rose Langdon, Langdon's now estranged wife, has been barred from taking a stand against her husband, which is insane because she's been in police custody for months. The law prevents a husband or wife from revealing confidential information against the other. Rose would say, quote, "I cannot understand why they would not let me testify. I could have told plenty. Don't they want this case solved? I was ready to give plenty of information. I know who killed Beulah Limerick. But they wouldn't let me talk. I'm going back to New York, my home. I'll have to move to some different section of town and perhaps change my name and hope he never finds me." End quote. She would say about her husband, quote, "He's a hard man, a cruel man. I'm afraid of him and I'm leaving here right away while he's still in jail." End quote. This was an obvious blow to the prosecution. Everyone has been waiting for her testimony since we knew we were going to go to trial. She actually had been sworn in, had taken the stand, had identified herself. And then the defense attorney called for a conference with the judge and DA. Justice O'Donoghue would say her testimony was inadmissible. Dak nabbit. So I was curious about this law because I've heard it before. Apparently it was in place to keep spousal harmony intact or something of the sort. It wasn't changed until 1980 case when it was deemed to be at the spouse's discretion whether or not they wanted to testify. Now, as always with everything, there are exceptions, but that's the basics. May 23rd, Langdon took the stand and boo-hooed some. Quote, "As God is my judge above, I did not kill Beulah Limerick," end quote. He said he didn't know her, that he had nothing against her, that he had not been intimate with her, and that she had not helped him sell liquor. He did admit to searching for evidence out of mere curiosity, and admitted he had been watching the house because of neighbor complaints, admitted that he had gone into the house to question her. May 24th, 1938. Lawyers make their closing statements and the jury will get the case. May 25th. Jury took 70 minutes to deliberate. What do you think happened? Langdon, after 14 months in jail, most of that was for the train case, was freed, acquitted. With the acquittal comes a look-see into the police department and its action 7 years ago. Major Ernest Brown, superintendent of police, has ordered the investigation when testimony in the trial showed that officers on duty in the 5th Precinct had altered the records to show different patrol boxes that Langdon had called from than he had actually called from. Apparently, it was revealed that on the night of the killing, he had called in from a call box just around the corner from her house, but asked to be reported as calling from a box a further distance. This testimony was given by several government witnesses, but Langdon denied all that. Each patrolman is required to telephone in once an hour and is given a 20-minute gap of time, 10 minutes before to 10 minutes after. Failure to place that call means a red check in the station's book, and the officer is called into the office to ask why he didn't call. Regardless, hopefully the police investigation revealed some things and the police could get back to rights and back to doing their job properly. Or not. So what do you think? I was ready to throw every book at Langdon, but the fact that during the trial, those closest to Beulah never said that Langdon had harassed Beulah, that she had been afraid of him, as had come out more at the coroner's inquest some 7 years ago. Did people forget? Was she not actually afraid? Was her mother and sister using Langdon as a scapegoat? Were some of his activities suspicious? Oh, for sure. But if every suspicious person got put in the clink, most of us would probably be in the slammer. Look at the stuff I look up on the internet. Yikes. What would a casual observer think of my activities? Oh dear. What's sad though? Beulah's murder, to this day, continues to be unsolved.